A lot of people are around, or some of them are around, who can tell you about the Great Depression and what people did to cope and what people had to do. For example, my dad would never ever live in a house that didn't have a apple tree in the backyard, because he wanted to make sure that we would always have something to eat, and at the very least we could have apples. My mother talks about the fact that they would run out of food, and so sometimes all they had to eat in the house was a piece of bread that they put bacon grease on. And everybody saved their bacon grease, because at times that's what you used instead of butter. So they had that. One woman I know talked about the fact that when she got out of high school, there were very few people left in the class, because the boys had all gone to fight in the war, which was starting, World War II. And she was really looking forward to college, but she couldn't afford the $25 that it took, I think for the first quarter, but it might have actually been for the whole semester. Didn't matter. She didn't have the $25. She also talked about getting married and having children, and that during the Depression, there were, when the war started and the Depression, they talked about how there were so many shortages, and one of the shortages they really noticed was, of course, the shortage for toilet paper. And if anybody in the neighborhood heard of a store getting in toilet paper, they would pool their ration points, and they'd have one person stay with the kids and another person go downtown, and they would buy all the toilet paper they possibly could. During the war, there were so many things that people couldn't have because we simply couldn't get it. So that for the very first time, when she was able to buy a banana, and she gave her daughter, who was about 3 years old at the time, her very first banana, her daughter didn't know what to do with it, and she tried just taking a bite right out of the top, because she didn't know that you had to peel a banana. Now, as we're talking to some of these people about the Great Depression, one of my students asked a question. She said, well, if you were alive in the Great Depression, then you were alive in World War II. And where were you during World War II? And one of the people, the lady, said, well, I was in Burma. And everybody kind of went, what? And she said, well, I was in Burma. I was married to a missionary, and we had a little church, and we had a little baby. And then we heard that the Japanese were coming, and we knew that we didn't dare get captured by the Japanese. So my husband stayed behind to try to take care of the church and the church members, and to try to delay the Japanese. And one of the men in the church went with me, and what we did is we cut off the legs of the high chair, and he rigged it into a backpack, and so he carried my baby. And I went behind with other things, and the two of us went over the mountains into India. And we were really lucky, because when we got to India and were in a refugee camp, I decided that I had to get my baby back to America, and so we got a boat going to America. Well, the day after I left the refugee camp, it was attacked, it was bombed, and so we just made it. On the ship, we had to be really, really, really careful, because everything was blacked out. All the portholes had black curtains on them. All the windows were closed and covered up. You couldn't make even so much as a spark. And they made sure that nobody smoked their cigarettes, because even the sight of a cigarette glowing would make it so that the submarines who were looking for us and trying to shoot us down would find us. Well, one of the students asked, did you have any trouble? Did they attacked you? And she said, well, yes, of course, but the torpedo missed. And she went back and went to work, and she was working in munitions, and she said she was on a bus one day, and she overheard two women behind her talking about how they hoped the war would go on, because if it went on just a while longer, they would make enough money to be able to buy a cottage up north. And she turned around and she just laid into them, because her husband was in danger, and her loved ones were in danger, and how dare they be so selfish as to hope this war would continue.